Well, good morning. Welcome to the Woodrow Wilson Center. Because this show is being broadcast live around the world, permit me, if you will, just to say a word or two about the Wilson Center for those of you who might not know us. The Wilson Center is the nation's official memorial to Woodrow Wilson, our 28th president. We try to serve as a bridge between the world of scholars and the world of public officials. In other words, to commemorate both the scholarly depth and the public policy concerns of President Wilson, who had a long, distinguished career in the educational world and the academic and scholarly world prior to entering the world of politics. I'm Bob Hathaway. I direct the Asia program here, and it's my good fortune to host today's event. We meet today, as you know, at a time of considerable turmoil and uncertainty in the U.S.-Pakistan relationship. One hears a growing chorus of voices on both sides, questioning whether it is even possible to create a long-term partnership between the two countries, questioning whether there exists a commonality of values and interests to sustain such a partnership. The early months of 2011 have been a particularly rocky period for the relationship, leading several well-regarded, influential papers to talk about the greatest crisis in the relationship since the 9/11 attacks. So today, I think, is an especially timely moment to hear from one of Pakistan's most senior, most highly regarded officials. Our guest today is Dr. Abdul Hafeez Shaikh, who is Pakistan's Minister of Finance, Revenue, Economic Affairs, and Statistics. Mr. Shaikh has had a long and distinguished career as a senior policymaker, as a politician, as a World Bank official, as a scholar, and in business. A few years ago, he served as finance minister in the province of Sindh, one of Pakistan's largest and most important provinces and the home to its leading commercial city, Karachi. And under his tenure, many people thought that Sindh's finances turned around and tended to give Dr. Shaikh credit for that. He subsequently served for several years as the federal minister for privatization and investment. He is a member of the Pakistan Senate. He was voted in 2004 by Pakistan's business community as Pakistan's Man of the Year. So I think you begin to get a sense of the regard with which Dr. Shaikh is regarded in Pakistan. He also holds a PhD in economics. Dr. Shaikh has agreed to speak to us for 15 or 20 minutes today, after which point he has agreed to take questions from the audience. Mr. Shaikh, we're delighted to have you, and we turn things over to you now.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you, sir, for that very nice introduction. I should hang around here in the U.S. more often if I keep getting such a recognition. Nobody seems to have much to say good about me in Pakistan, so I'm delighted to be here. It's an honor for me, and thank you for the invitation. I think we are meeting at a critical time. Uh, the Pakistan-U.S. relationship has acquired a significance that it never had before. It's seen as important both for the peace and security of the region, and perhaps indeed for the whole world. The need to learn from the past, as well as our recent experiences, and to shape and configure the relationship to fulfill the expectations and the needs of the two parties is more critical than it has ever been. The US and Pakistan have enjoyed a long relationship. It has been episodic and transactional at times, and sometimes there has been a desire to make it strategic and on a sustained footing. I think one of the key features that has characterized this relationship is the degree of variation that it has seen, where Pakistan has sometimes been labeled as the most allied ally, and at other times as the most sanctioned ally. And all this within a period of years. And right now, in the post-9/11 scenario, it's labeled as a major non-NATO ally. Political security considerations have often led to government external assistance on the economic front as well. And the growth spurts, the three growth spurts that Pakistan has had in the 60s, the 80s, and the 2000s have somehow been linked to the US external assistance, or at least have coincided with periods of external assistance from the US. A key feature of this external assistance from the US has been that it has coincided with wars. In the first case, the Cold War. In the second case, the Soviet-Afghan War. And in the third case, the so-called terror war. Sadly, in each case, when the war has ended, so has the external assistance. And this departure of the US from the region has had tragic consequences, at least in the last case. Now it seems like we're entering a new era, or we have entered a new era. And the question that we want to ask is, why did the US walk away in the past? And how can we learn to put this relationship on a sounder, more solid, more sustained footing, which is not subject and vulnerable to shocks? I think one of the answers that the US could find it easy to walk away is that because the relationship was based primarily on non-economic considerations. And therefore, this is one of the lessons we have to draw, and this is an area that we need to focus. And I think the new administration and our government appear to have recognized this missing dimension in the relationship and are trying to remedy that. And we will see how it unfolds. The second point, apart from this variation and the need to learn from the time path of our engagement of the past, is that economic relations have always been there between the US and Pakistan. They have chugged along. There has been a significant interaction, but it has never realized its true and fullest potential. So, in spite of that, there's a significant degree of economic interaction that has been there throughout and has survived the vicissitudes of politics. Trade, for example, is roughly $5 billion a year. FDI from the US, roughly $500 million on average per year. Remittances approaching $1.8 to $2 billion a year from the US. And government-to-government assistance now targeted at $1.5 billion for economic matters per year. So the second question that we want to think about is how to seize the potential that exists and to build upon this major level of economic integration to a new plateau which truly realizes the full potential and is truly insulated from happenings on the political and other fronts. Let us turn to Pakistan now and see what's been happening there. First of all, democracy is back. And it's back with all its vibrancy, with all its hullabaloo, noise, and the parliament is functioning. It has passed landmark legislation. It has been a period where the president has voluntarily handed over powers back to the parliament, and in turn, the federal government has voluntarily handed over responsibilities and additional resources to the provinces. A dramatic development has been the passage of the new National Finance Commission award, in which 300 to 400 billion extra rupees are going to be transferred to the provinces, which is what most people in this room would want, which is what most Pakistanis would want. Because the things that matter to the people, education and health and drinking water and municipal services and police and law and order and security at the local level, are all departments within the provincial mandate. And so the more resources they have, the more they will be able to respond to the demands of the people. And so the service delivery can be improved. And this has been, I think, a dramatic and far-reaching step, and its consequences will begin to be seen over time. Another aspect of the new democratic dispensation is that we have institutions that are working for transparency and for accountability, the likes of which have never been seen before. And again, in a first in parliamentary history anywhere, the Chief Accountability Officer of the Government of Pakistan is a person whose official title is the Leader of the House, Leader of the Opposition in the Parliament. The Leader of the Opposition in the Parliament is also the Chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, which is the chief accountability organization of the government. So you have this wonderful experience of the Leader of the Opposition in a position to summon anybody, scrutinize anybody, ask any question from anybody, and demand explanation from anybody, from the Prime Minister down to everyone. And he does that with relish. You also have a Supreme Court where the Chief Justice and the court is highly active in scrutinizing, in investigating, in probing, in summoning, and asking all sorts of questions from everybody in the government. This, again, I think is exciting development and makes our society open. It makes our officials accountable. We also have a free media, and I think it's there. Again, totally free, able to comment and critique and question and quiz and criticize. And every evening, there are at least 15 channels which from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. have talk shows which do very little else but to focus on public issues. And I think they perform their job with zeal and enthusiasm. Turning to the economic matters, this government inherited a difficult situation and an economy at the verge of collapse. A lot of steps have been done to try and restore macroeconomic stability, try to mobilize taxation, try to cut down expenditures. Even in this most recent budget, expenditures were frozen at nominal levels of last year, which means a real reduction of 10 to 12%. New taxes have been levied on capital gains tax on stockbrokers. New sectors have been brought in, like fertilizer and pesticides and tractors and textiles and leather and others, which were excluded before. 700,000 new people with multiple bank accounts, with international travel, with the best addresses of Pakistan who are not paying taxes are being pursued to broaden the income tax net. And so you have a new drive, a new initiative, and the goal is to raise the abysmally low tax to GDP ratio from less than 10% to closer to 14% over the next 3 to 4 years. At the same time, while these painful decisions, including passing the energy prices, passing the international rise in oil prices to the consumers, there has been a conscious attempt to have a social safety net, to not forget the already forgotten, and to try and reach out to the poorest of the poor through automated systems of cash transfers. And this is a system that now even the World Bank has accepted is one of the best managed and best executed in the world. And so a combination, a balance is being struck between looking after the very poor during the transition while going on with the most difficult decisions in a political environment that is also not very conducive and remains fragile. On top of this, Pakistan has had multiple challenges to face. Over this last year, we have the continuing expenditure on security and on war, and our soldiers have sacrificed their lives, our citizens have been targeted, and the exchequer has had to bear a great burden. But this is a war to which we are committed, and naturally, in the middle of a war, you cannot starve your soldiers, so the fight has to go on, and the monies have to be paid. Second, we had the greatest disaster of our history because of the great floods of 2010, when 20 million people were affected, crops were destroyed, infrastructure was damaged, lives were shattered. Over $10 billion of damages were incurred, and 2 percentage points from the growth rate of the GDP was wiped out. And third, we now have to struggle and get exposure to the rising prices of oil, which we had targeted at $70 a barrel in our budget making, but it has hit 120, and at least is likely to remain above 100. In spite of that, like I said, the government and the people have shown resilience. We have continued to pursue the economic reform agenda, trying to focus on public sector efficiency. Even the federal cabinet has been slashed by 2/3 from 60 to 22. Our government budget for development programs for government projects was slashed from 280 billion by 100 billion to 180. So the idea is to ensure the security of public finances, to maintain a fiscal discipline, to bring down fiscal deficit, which when the government came into power was above 7.5% to around 5 to 5.5%, and to try and create a platform for growth. So we've been working on a growth strategy to try and give jobs to our young people and to get back on the trajectory of growth approaching 6% or so. Some of the results are beginning to show, and I'm happy to share those with you. On the external front, the exports have shown dramatic increase of 26% in the last 9 months. If you compare February with February of the last year, the growth is a phenomenal 46%, and the exports are likely to cross $24 billion, the highest ever. Similarly, the remittances are approaching $1 billion a month and are likely to cross $11 billion this year, the highest ever. The benefits of these two is being shown in the reserves of the foreign exchange, which have also reached the highest ever level of $17.5 billion. At the same time, we have rationalized our government program, and we feel that a combination of all these must be shared. The emerging benefits in the economy must be shared with large segments of the people. And the government has adopted pricing policies for agriculture sector to incentivize them to grow more and benefit from the commodity boom, and as well as share in the global prosperity that is emerging from the rise in the price of food products. And this is paying off. We are expected now to have a bumper wheat crop, the highest ever, and because the pricing is geared in such a way, this will lead to large-scale prosperity in the countryside. So these are some of the emerging areas of positive results. And I turn now, in my last set of comments, to US-Pakistan economic relations. I believe that because there's a reformist government in Pakistan, a democratic government that is not burdened with trying to do funny things to achieve legitimacy, and we have a global configuration in which the destinies of the two countries appear to be tied for some time, and hopefully for a longer time, that a new way of thinking about how to secure the foundations of this relationship is indeed the responsibility of leadership of the two sides. I think the US government has responded or tried to respond to this challenge, and a new external assistance law has been passed, the Kerry-Lugar-Berman, which attempts to give $1.5 billion every year. In reality, the amounts dispersed are less, but I think a platform and an institutional arrangement exists under which the two countries can work out. 5 areas have been identified under the Kerry-Lugar-Berman institutional arrangement for a special focus. These are energy security, food security, economic growth, particular focus on the affected areas in the tribal region, and social sector, including education and health. I believe that if the money is dispersed and if it's widely used, this can have far-reaching consequences. At the same time, given the demands and the requirements of the country and the potential that exists in the private sector, and the lesson from the past of not relying upon governments alone, it's very important to think of platforms for business-to-business dialogue and for ventures in which US businesses can make money so that they remain motivated and participate in the economic development of our country while also benefiting their shareholders. So several opportunities exist, one of which, of course, the Kerry-Lugar-Berman is itself trying to develop, and that is the idea of a Pakistan-American Enterprise Fund, which would be of $300 million. It's under the process of legislation, and we are optimistic that once that's passed, it will be a vehicle from which the US businesses can draw, and it can be leveraged to do larger projects. And it will be potentially a magnet for attracting some kind of investors to Pakistan. About Pakistan in general, it is a country with tremendous opportunities. Sometimes I'm asked which are the sectors that people should focus on. And my answer is that government ministers are particularly inept in answering such questions, because if I knew which sectors, I would be in business myself. But I think what I can say is that everywhere, and I've had the opportunity to work in 24 countries, and I think as a student of development, the opportunities in Pakistan are second to none compared to all the 24 countries that I have worked in. There are opportunities in agriculture and in services and in telecommunications and in energy and in mining and in oil and gas in particular. And everywhere you look, you will see opportunities. The question is there a liberal investment regime that allows people to come and participate? On that score, let me share with you the nature of the Pakistani investment regime. I believe it's the most liberal, or one of the most liberal in the entire world. We do not discriminate against foreigners. Foreigners are welcome in any sector of the economy. They can participate 1% of equity or 100% of the equity. There's no requirement for any local partner, like in some countries. There are no limits on how much capital you can bring in or take out. There are no limits on how much money you can repatriate in the form of dividends or profits or licenses or whatever. So here is an environment which is very conducive, very welcoming, and the government is beginning another, hopefully, exciting program of privatization in which government assets in electricity and in oil and gas and manufacturing will be available. And I think, above all, what one needs to do is, instead of listening to the speeches of ministers, is to talk to your own colleagues who are already there. There's American Business Association of Pakistan. You can talk to them. Most of them are already expanding. In the last 2 to 3 years, the state bank governor was telling me, have been the best for most of them. And they will share this information with you. If they want to keep Pakistan as a secret for themselves, then of course you can always look at their books. They are available. And they will corroborate the story. So I think I will stop now, and hopefully we can have an interactive discussion. I'd like to learn from you. Let me also, in closing, appreciate the U.S. Government and its leadership for the focus that they're giving to Pakistan, for their recognition of the strategic nature of our relationship and the benefits that will accrue to the world if we invest into this relationship and recognize each other's strengths and each other's capacities to contribute, and the fact that they have initiated a strategic dialogue between our two countries, to which Pakistan has responded, which covers a large set of areas, including security and defense and energy and economy and trade and so on. And also, I want to end by thanking the US government for the support they gave us, particularly in the initial phase of our floods and rescue and relief operations, and for being a part of the international coalition through the United Nations network in supporting our suffering brothers and sisters, and also for the support they've extended to us in trying to help us at other multilateral settings. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Minister, for really a very thorough but also a very encouraging set of remarks. In fact, your optimism, your confidence was really striking, and all the more so because it flies in the face, I think, of the conventional wisdom. Maybe I'm talking to the wrong people, but when I read the Pakistani press, when I talk to Pakistani friends, when I talk to people in this town who follow Pakistan closely, they don't seem to have nearly the optimism and the confidence you do. And I'd like to get your views as to why that is. How do you explain the gap, as it were, between what you say is the real situation and the general perception that things are not going particularly well and perhaps going in the wrong direction? Is this simply a question of the right information not getting out, or is something else at work here?
Well, that's a good question, and I myself think about it a lot, because your observation about negative perception in certain segments of our people, I think is well-founded. And we have to obviously take some blame for a failure to communicate our point of view as effectively as one can. At the same time, I believe that when you live in an era where you have so much capacity of other narrators to get their points of view, and when expectations are running so high, and you have a situation of a coalition government, and you have within your own country a free press, which is, I think, just beginning to find the rules of the game, which are not developed, I think, at the moment. Somebody asked me, how do you feel like getting your point of view across? And how do you feel? And I said, it's like if you are in the Democratic Party in the US, you have one Republican Party to deal with. And you have, I think, maybe one Fox channel to deal with. But if you are a Democratic Party or any party ruling in Pakistan, you have maybe 5 Republican parties to deal with and 15 Fox channels to deal with. And of course, it can get a bit daunting to get your point of view across in that situation. So I don't know. I have tried to state some things which are facts. And of course, one can try to get that narrative across. And I would say also in the US that we have a question of public lack of trust or trust deficit. And I think sometimes when we talk on this issue with the US counterparts, within the strategic dialogue, in public diplomacy, both sides attempt to figure out, because we also pose this question to the US, that why is it that if you have good intentions, and why is it that if you are trying to support our country, that there is that the point of view doesn't get across? Why is there a trust deficit? And so I think this is a question that needs a greater scrutiny by people, who are experts in this issue. I think within the US, obviously there are all sorts of interests and all sorts of point of view. And there are 2 or 3 things that somehow militate against us. One is, of course, there's a perception that a lot of money is going to Pakistan at a time when there is a requirement for fiscal restraint and, expenditure cutting at home. So there we have to come out and explain the facts. I think it's largely a myth that Pakistan is a beneficiary of these tens of billions of dollars. The truth is that in the Kerry-Lugar arrangement this year, we have not even received 300 million. So, but when people go to the Hill and people go around talking about tens of billions of dollars, and you have public representatives, they naturally have to think about it. And I think foreign assistance never has a good, strong lobby. So we don't want to think of Pakistan as a country that is primarily attempting to simply get foreign assistance. No, sir. We are saying, let us have trade. We are saying, let us open our markets to each other so that we can give a arrangement where the American businesses can flourish in Pakistan and our businesses can flourish here, and it's good for everybody. And this was our approach with the European Union. And I'm happy to tell you that we have succeeded in opening new areas with the European Union for trade. Because this is the message we want to give, is that if we are to have lasting relationships and if we are to break some stereotypes, then it is important that we focus on trade. But if there are barriers to trade, then obviously they have to be tackled. And so yes, I think a lot of work needs to be done by both sides, by friends of both sides within their countries, to try and get this view across. Especially if in this country there's a perception of asymmetry, as if we are asymmetrically dependent on the US. Whereas what we want to get across, which of course we as a small third world country have difficulty getting across in a place like this. But part of the reason I'm here is precisely to do it in my own small way and to get, the benefit of people like yourself to subsequently take the message to a larger audience in a more effective way than I can.
Well, thank you. We'll now turn to the audience. Let me remind our audience that Dr. Shaikh is the Minister for Finance, Revenue, Economic Affairs, and Statistics. I expect some of us would be delighted to ask questions on a variety of other issues, but I think to be fair to our guest and given particularly our limited amount of time, I would request that you direct your questions to the Minister in the areas for which he's responsibility. Dennis will ask you first. I will ask you to wait until we get a microphone to you, to identify yourself, and to keep your remarks very short.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Minister, for the very upbeat appraisal of the situation. I had two questions, not entirely related. The first, you spoke about the prospects for business, American business in Pakistan, investment, et cetera. I wonder, I think that one of the holdups has been the lack of an investment treaty. And my impression was when this was negotiated, or the effort was made to negotiate it, I think during President Bush's visit, that the holdup was on the Pakistani side. And I wonder if you could fill us in where that sits today. The second question, another area, devolution. A very, very sweeping change, lots of new responsibilities to the provinces. But I'm wondering about the financial side. Do the provinces have the basis for paying for these new opportunities or these new functions? And in particular, I was wondering about the, and I think as part of devolution, the fact that the provinces now will have the right to borrow money. Thank you.
Yes, I think excellent questions. First of all, I'll share with you my own humble view about the role of these business treaties in promoting investment. My own view, and I could be wrong, is that the role of having a business investment treaty between two countries in generally promoting investment between two countries is usually not so great. Of course, it might provide certain extra safeguards which might alleviate some super risk-averse people's concerns, but that we have a thriving, and historically tested achievement of so many US companies that it's not a new terrain where you are going. Second, the last discussion we had on this business investment treaty, which probably I think has been a really good exercise for lawyers on both sides, is that the US was coming up with a new template for future business investment treaties, or BIT as they are called. And that once that template was ready, then the discussions could restart. So this is my understanding of where things stood last time. But if anybody in the room has more up-to-date information, I think we can all be enlightened by it. The second point about devolution. It's very important to recognize that devolution is going on both on the administration side and on the resources side. In fact, it's much more drastic on the resource side. What is being devolved to the provinces are 18 ministries which used to be with the federal government and the provincial governments. And now it's been decided that to get rid of this overlap and have excessive government, that they should be solely the domain of the provinces. On the finance side, previously, we have a divisible pool of all the taxes that are raised. And out of that, previously, 45% used to go to the provinces and 55% would go to the federation. And now 60% would go to the provinces and about 40% would go to the center. So this is a very dramatic shift. And as I said, it's about 300 to 400 extra billion rupees. And it poses a real problem for the federal government because they are responsible for debt servicing of the past. They are responsible for the security expenditures and of course for running civilian government at the center. On your question about whether they'll be able to borrow, provinces have always been able to borrow from international agencies, but that borrowing is done in coordination with the federal government because only the federal government is the sovereign, and I think they can borrow through an arrangement with the federal government because they bear the risks related to the foreign exchange. Yes, yes.
We'll get you in a minute. All the way in the back. I think that's Polly, though I can't see because the lights are in my eye.
Yes, Polly Nayak, and thank you for your remarks, Mr. Minister. I do have a question about Carrie Lugar Berman. And I was wondering whether I understood you to imply that it is not essential to Pakistan to have it. So perhaps you could clarify that. And then I have another question, which is if you feel that Carrie Lugar Berman is still a good idea, where would you, from your vantage point, particularly like to see those monies go? What would be, from a Pakistani perspective, the best outcome?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I believe it's very important for Pakistan-U.S. economic relationship. Second, I believe it's very important as a symbol of the U.S. government and its Congress's commitment to a new democratic government in Pakistan. And three, I think that if it is disbursed in a proper way and configured in a proper way and implemented in a proper way, then it can have far-reaching consequences for the people of Pakistan. And in, altering some of the misperceptions that are there. But of course, in the larger scheme of things, one has to see how much impact something of that magnitude can have. In my own view, I think I have sat down with U.S. officials, with the U.S. aid administrator, with their representatives in Pakistan, and with the Pakistan-Afghanistan special envoy, Ambassador Holbrooke, who was a great friend of Pakistan and a big loss for us. And we determined these 5 areas, which were energy security, food security, infrastructure development in the affected areas, private sector growth, which includes this enterprise development fund, and fifth, social sector. And I think the amounts were also dedicated to these sectors, indicative amounts for the 5 years and precise amounts to specific projects for the first 2 years. So I think it's a promising program, and in no way do I want to appear to be either dismissive of it or not thankful for it.
Okay, down here in the front.
Taha Gaya with the Pakistani American Leadership Center. I think at a certain point we need to go beyond this statement of we need trade from market access in the U.S. from Pakistan. I mean, as the Pakistani American community, we've been working on some of these things, and there has to be a recognition that one of Pakistan's largest exports to the U.S. is in textiles and apparels. But at the same time, we have a domestic U.S. textile industry that's very hyper protective against any kind of tariff reduction for Pakistani products. So there needs to be some kind of cooperation between, both of our sides to kind of figure out what specific items we can have those negotiations on and get that market access for. And then my second question has to do with, and obviously right now we have this environment coming up where Congress is looking to pass some of these FTAs, whether it's the U.S.-Colombia Free Trade Agreement, the South Korea Free Trade Agreement, where there's going to be an opportunity for this market access to actually maybe get bundled with that and passed. So if we can get some more details on strategic strategies. And the second question is on, when we have things like the U.S. Pakistan American Enterprise Fund, that's where these questions come in, where it's like, why do we need essentially this government fund investing in Pakistan that's going to be overseen by private managers? And I think part of that is you see very smooth pathways for U.S. businesses to go into India, which is next door. So I think a lot of that comparative analyzing is going on when U.S.s are looking to base, where are we going to base our manufacturing facilities, where are we going to base these things. So I know you said you weren't in a position to describe what Pakistan's competitive advantage was, but if you can also talk about maybe some things that Pakistan can do to facilitate U.S. businesses going into Pakistan, whether that's creating a strategic communication strategy of how Pakistan is a good investment destination here in the U.S., or sponsoring trade delegations and business delegations, because I think there's the convening power of government where we can actually facilitate these private sector missions to U.S. private sector missions to Pakistan. If you can talk a little about those efforts. Thank you.
Mr. Minister, you notice this is a very savvy audience. Everybody takes advantage of the microphone to ask 2 questions.
Yes. Should I just selectively pick one of them? Again, I think that you're absolutely right that in the end, what we want, or what the 2 parties may want, is the upper bound on that comes from the political constraints. So clearly, we have to desire and we have to strive for a trade regime that is as open as possible. But at the same time, we have to recognize that we may not succeed, or we may not succeed entirely because of domestic political considerations, and that's a fact of life. So you are absolutely correct in saying that you don't want to bang your head against a brick wall, but sometimes if you try hard enough, a way is found. And your other point about, I think is a general one to which I can only agree to, that you have to do many things to achieve the goal of trade promotion, whether it's trade delegations, business delegations, and fairs, and so on. About the FTA, FTA is an ambitious goal. And although we have talked about it with our colleagues in the US, it's a long, multi-year process. And here we are trying to at least get the business investment treaty done, which in many cases is a prelude towards the, thinking of the FTA. So I think we have a bit to go there, but that should be the eventual goal for us.
Since we're almost running out of time, I will ask people to restrict themselves to 1 question now. This gentleman here, and then this gentleman.
Thank you. Andrew Wilson from the Center for International Private Enterprise. I have a question on taxation and collecting of taxes. The Pakistan Business Council, in its recent National Business Agenda, called on the Pakistani government to both diversify its tax base and to improve collection. And I'd like to hear your views on how it can go about doing this.
Yes. I think this has been a hot topic in Pakistan, and if you've seen some of the recent measures the government has taken have been precisely in this direction. First, there has been a massive amount of time spent in political dialogue, and not just with politicians and political parties, but also with the stakeholders, including the Pakistan Business Council. I was the one who organized their meeting with the president. We spoke to them before, and they put their voice behind this. So we are grateful to them. So there's an emerging, coalition, which is saying, look, these are areas we cannot ignore anymore, and we need to focus on them. As I said, we've already taken in the last few weeks steps to bring in totally new sectors that were outside the net, including textile, which is the most powerful sector in Pakistan, has always resisted being taxed, and now they have been taxed. Fertilizer, they have been taxed. Leather, sports goods, surgical goods, pesticides, tractors, and in addition to that, there are thousands of products that are already in the general sales tax that are in the system. We imposed a new tax on capital gains, again, entirely new sector. Agriculture income tax, there's been a lot of discussion on that. I want to say that we are committed to improving the tax system, which is in the provincial governments. So we are having a dialogue with the provincial governments, and we are trying to raise the bar for them, that either you improve the tax collection on agriculture, or we have to think in terms of other mechanisms because nobody can escape taxes. As I said, we have identified 700,000 people. We are going after them. The chairman of the Revenue Service is here. He's having dialogue with the IMF and others, sharing these experiences. We identified 4,000 of the most important Pakistani firms, or many of them amongst the most important, that were evading taxes. And the chairman, Revenue Service, came to me and said, what can he do? They are the most powerful people in the country. That was a 30-second discussion. I said, prosecute them all. And so that very day, cases were registered against all 4,000 of those companies who had evaded 7.6 billion rupees. In terms of what are we doing to change the administration, a new chairman of the Revenue Service has been put in place. He has made hundreds of changes in the top leadership, and I think all pressures are being resisted to try and inject professionalism, avoid political interference. But these things take time. If you are running, a marathon and you can't judge a performance by the first, 10 steps, we feel like, I think this is a process that has to take some time. People talk of all these, leaders who transformed their countries, but the success was achieved in the 10th or 15th year. I'm not saying that we should wait till that long, but at least let's wait 10 or 15, months after these changes have been made, and so on.
Gentleman here.
I'm Javed Hamid, consultant to the World Bank. Mr. Minister, congratulations. It's a fantastic presentation. Thank you very much. A quick question, and this is regarding the energy sector. You spoke about it. It's electricity and the shortages. And can you just say a few words about what the policy is to attract more investment in that sector and alleviate the problems of the shortages of electricity? Thank you.
Yes. Okay. The problem of the shortages is because of multiple reasons, right? And we can decompose this into three types of issues. Number one is that government has not had the money in the past to pay every single producer of electricity according to their demands. And that has created what is called the circular debt problem, okay? Now, a serious effort has been made, and a new vehicle has been created to park this circular debt separately, so this distortion is minimized. Okay, this amount of 300 billion was separated, and I think an effort is made to inject transparency in this and to minimize this distortion. Okay. Second is the question of the subsidy regime or the pricing regime. Government, I think, has taken extraordinarily bold decisions in passing on the previously suppressed prices of electricity to the consumers. And the prices of electricity have been raised more than 60% in the last 2 years. And even now, for a political government, that's pretty heroic. And even now, 2% per month, they are being increased. In terms of other efforts of management, all the government companies, there are like 12 or 13 distribution companies and some other related companies, their boards of directors have been totally changed. And the people who have been put there are all professionals, all people that you could recognize or think that they are good people, that they will stand up to political interference, that they are knowledgeable, that they would scrutinize the management's performance from one angle. How are they performing in terms of professional conduct and commercial considerations? So I think getting, and a lot of the old plants, they are being renovated. And as far as investment policies, I think that's a sector that has historically enjoyed a great deal of international investor participation. And it remains true even now. If anything, it's acquired a greater urgency so that areas of alternate energy, of hydropower, of all kind of new ways of tackling it are available and open and are being availed of. And we would like, in my meetings here with the Chamber of Commerce, with the American business groups, I see a lot of interest within the US and some of the companies who we are talking to. So this is an area, I think, of prime focus for us.
Mr. Minister, I think we could go on all day. Unfortunately, you have other obligations, and so I think we have to free you at this time. We wish you very good luck, the balance of your stay here. I think you'll find a keen interest to work with you and your colleagues on what, after all, many of us believe is a joint enterprise. We wish you good luck. We thank you for joining us today, and if you will join me in expressing our appreciation to our minister. We are now adjourned.
Thank you, Mr.